All right, everybody, thank you so much. If you don't mind, just grab a seat. You can grab a coffee. And then we'll go from there. So let me get out of this way so you guys can take a look at it. For those of you, most of you I don't know, there's some people I do know here. My name is Ron Chinzer. I am part of this. In the back there you have Jason Kondo. He's my partner. We have some other police officers here. Obviously some of your local police officers. Nilo and his partner who've been here. So thank you for coming first and foremost. Jason and myself, we've worked in the gun and gang street teams for many years. And what that is you'll see it all the time on the news, right? Where you see Toronto police and all these other police agencies get together and we take these rams and we go and we get 100 search warrants and we arrest 150 people and we seize 50 guns and all the millions of dollars worth of drugs and cash. And we've been doing that for 15 years.
And they're out the street the next day?
Potentially, some of them, she said, and they're out the street the next day. But we've been doing that for 15 years. Now I'll ask you this here for this room, and in your experience, if you have a problem, and for 15 years you've been dealing with the problem, and every time you've been dealing with that problem, you've been getting good results, but the problem doesn't go away, have we really solved the problem? No, not at all. So one of our deputy chiefs, who's a really high up in Toronto Police Service, came down to the office. He talked to Jason. He said, listen, Jason, we need to expand what we're doing, and we got to start looking at how do we get a gang member out of a gang. Instead of just arresting all these people every time, we have a unique opportunity where we might be able to influence a kid who is a gang member or even a young adult who's a gang member. We can potentially motivate them to get out of a gang. We need to start looking how to do that. Jason and I had worked together in the past. We got back together again for this. And the last 3 years, we've been trying to figure this out. All right, and the key word is trying. So I'll ask you here, if you got asked that question, how do you get a gang member out of a gang? What would you do?
I'd find out what they're lacking in their life. Do they have enough food? Do they have housing? Have medical care? Whatever.
So what she said is she'd find out what they're lacking in their life. Is it housing? Is it food? Is it medical care? What is it that they're lacking? Anybody else?
Yeah, at a young age, people want to excitement, want adventure, want to show their strength. So there has to be a good outlet for that.
Mm-hmm. So an outlet.
I wanted a lot of outlets, but and it could be borderline on the border of the narrative. So someone has to, stop them from stepping up beyond the border of crime. But within the bounds of legalities, a lot of activities, a lot of adventures, a lot of exciting stuff, exciting surrounding stuff that they can do instead of trying to attack somebody or something.
So what you're saying, if I can summarize it for everybody who might not have heard you, and if I'm summarizing it right, please let me know, is that the kids that are looking to dump their energy, give them different outlets to dump it. Something that's not criminal. All right, and what else? Does anybody else have anything else?
Yeah, I think you have. I mean, I don't know how we do this, but television, media, everything glamorizes. Gangs, drugs, whatever. It looks sexy. It looks, whatever. So, how do we make it less glamorous? How do we show the TV side?
Yeah. So she said, make it less glamorous, make it less appealing, especially in the media when it comes down to movies, music, rap music, all these other things. All right. Now, anybody else have anything else they want to add? How do we get a gang member out of a gang? You guys got the right ideas, absolutely the right ideas. But is there a solution that encompasses all of that in one solution? There's not. All right, and that's the issue we had. So with us, when we got tasked with this idea, we spent months trying to figure out how to do this, and we didn't want to waste time. We don't have time to waste. All right, and here we are 3 years later, and we have a very good direction to go in, but it took us 3 years to figure it out. And what we did is we looked all over the world. We touched base with police agencies all over the world, and we said, what are you doing for this? We looked at academic publications all over the world, produced and published by PhDs from well-known universities to different government organizations. And what we found was there is no way in the world to get a gang member out of a gang. There is no way. But we did learn a lot of things. And what we did learn was there are ways to stop or prevent a kid from the age of 0 all the way up to 18 from choosing this as the option for them in life. There's many things we can all do, but it ultimately ends up, unfortunately, and we'll get to why that happens, where it's the police that have to take the brunt end of it. And trust us, we have an absolute role in this, but we have a very clear role. And in us trying to find what the root cause problem is of these issues, and we realized we can't get gang members out of gangs, and by accident we came across all this literature and evidence-based success stories that said we have many things that we can do to prevent a kid from following this lifestyle. That's the age of those kids back there. It is a real thing. It doesn't just magically happen overnight. But we now need to be educated as to what are the things we need to look for as parents, as caregivers, as grandparents, as teachers, as law enforcement, as whatever you are in this world. You have to start looking at certain things. You got to pay attention to what they are. So I'll ask you here, what is the purpose of a gang? And the reason I ask this question is, for us, we got tasked with this problem to solve. And as government agents, as employees of the Toronto Police Service, we couldn't just say, well, we know the answer and just base it off of our experiences. We know that's not true. So we have to discover or identify 3 things. And those 3 things are, we've got to deal with kids that are in gangs. So what exactly is a gang? We have to have a clear picture of what are we looking at. In some communities in Toronto, they're notoriously known and associated with gangs. And it's been like that for 40 years. Right? And does anybody want to even throw out some intersections that they think are associated?
Well, they have an identity.
They have an identity. What's the first thing you think of? Gangs. Give me another intersection. All right, so look at that. So we kind of know areas we look at now. If we go there and we see kids that kind of fit the description of a gang member, and let's make that description. So in your experience, what is a gang member? If we have to physically describe a gang member, let's start. Is it a boy or a girl? Either. Mostly male. So are we good? We're going to go with a male. And this is the idea here, okay? We just got to be open and honest. We just got to get it out in the open.
18 to 30.
18 to 30, which is a huge range. Let's take it down within 5 years. What do you think? 18 and 30, if we have to bring it down to
Younger, I think younger. Yeah, I think younger.
teenager? 15? 15, boy. What about clothing? Do they dress a certain way? Hip hop style. So what's hip hop style? Like, describe it to me. Low pants? All right. And then
They wear masks now. They all wear ski masks.
ski masks. Sorry? Hoodies? All right, many things like that. So hoodies. And then what about skin color?
That could be anything.
It's all. We can all say all, but let's just, in the interest of being open and honest, black. Listen, wait a minute, hold on, stop right here. We'll stop right here. I'll stop right here, okay? The point of this, and we do this exercise way more in depth than other places. The reason I want to just get to the point here with you guys is seems to be an audience where it's not really an uneducated audience. You guys seem to have your own experiences. You're out here, you were early, which means you have vested interest in the solution here. The reason I bring this up is because this is our 16th town hall. And all of them except for one, when we actually break this down, everybody says a 15-year-old black kid. Right? And listen, the reason I'm saying that and the reason we go through this exercise to bring that up is to say that that's not true. For example, last night we were in a very impacted community in the Chalk Farm neighborhood. Everybody in the audience was black skin color. And when I told them and I said, you describe a gang member to me, they said a black male. When we went to Jane and Finch and we did other communities, they said a black 15-year-old kid. All right. And then we get to other neighborhoods and nobody wants to say what they're thinking. The reason we bring this up and we make this super uncomfortable is it has to be uncomfortable because it's not true. The reason I bring that up to say it's not true, it's a 15-year-old black kid, is because if we were to go to Finch, one of the areas that you told me about, and I were to see 15-year-old black kids playing in the park, what do people think they are? Gang members. You know what they're probably not 99.99% of the time? They're probably not a gang member. They're probably a 15-year-old kid playing in their neighborhood. But what happens to kids like that live in those neighborhoods that unfairly get that instant label? Whether or not you want to admit you do that or not, that's up to you. That's not up to me. I don't know how you think. What I can tell you in my experience and talking to thousands of people, when we really dig back the layers, you know what you're thinking deep down in your head. And the point is we got to start being honest with what we're thinking, because what you're thinking might not always be the truth. Probably in most cases when it's a general assumption, you're probably wrong. You might have had an individual experience that solidifies that for you, and that experience is 100% true to you. But we're not in the interest of basing our problem-solving methods on solely our experiences and what we're going to assume. We have to look at the problem as a whole. Well, I'll tell you, in the city of Toronto, that's not the case 100% of the time. In some neighborhoods, the gang members might be predominantly black, and in some neighborhoods, they might be predominantly brown skinned, and in some neighborhoods, they could be Asian, some neighborhoods, they could be Caucasian. And the idea with that is, with the city of Toronto, it just gets this blanket. All right, it just gets this blanket, and that blanket applies to not only problems, but it applies to solutions. We were talking earlier to some of the other members here, and we had said, we talked about solutions. The purpose of us being in these individual neighborhoods are to find out what the individual community problems are. What the problems are here are not the same problems in Chalk Farm, right? Because we use the term gang. But let's look at what gangs actually do.
I wanted to ask you said what's the purpose of a
Yep.
gang? I'd rather want you to tell me, how do you define a gang or a gang?
I'll tell you.
How do you make a distinction between a bunch of kids just hanging out and playing versus this is a gang?
I'll tell you 100% how we do it, and we're going to get through that now. But I'll tell you what the actual purposes of a gang. So if I were to ask you the purpose of a gang, a lot of people, what they do is they give reasons for a gang. They're seeking a family, they want some belonging, they have friends. Those are reasons, that's not the purpose. Empirically based, being in every textbook, every expert, legally how we identify gangs and what we look for is, for gang activity, this is gang activity right here. These are the three elements that always sit in every gang all over the world. Right? Gangs exist for this purpose, traditionally. Are they starting to evolve? Yes, 100%. But they exist to control a territory. Why do they want to control a territory? They want to deal drugs. Why do they want to deal drugs? They want to make money. But then when you give drugs, you have to collect debt. So to collect debt, to deal drugs, to make money, you got to control an area. That's why gangs exist. But gangs don't just do this. What are the other things that gangs actually do? What do we hear of right now in the news every day almost? Shootings. So you hear gangs do shootings, and what else do gangs do? What's the worst thing that can happen if somebody gets shot? They die. You have murder, you have homicide, you have shootings, you have illegal possessions of gun, you have drug trafficking. Drug trafficking goes to who? Users and addicts. And what happens to some addicts? They take too much. They die. So you have drug overdoses. Do gang members kidnap people? Yeah. Do they intimidate people? Yes. Do they break into your house? Yes. Do they steal your car? Yes. Do they steal from stores? Yes. Do they rob people? Yes. Do they recruit young kids into the criminal lifestyle? 100%. Do they intimidate people? Do they extort people? But we just do this. Gang. Well, what we just talked about is what? That's a host of activities. All of those activities are somehow connected to one of these three, if not all of these three. So those kids that we see in that park, unless they're doing this, that's not a gang by our definition. That doesn't fit a gang. A gang by our definition has to be 3 or more people who conspire to commit an offense, a serious offense, for the purpose of something tangible. So it's 3 or more people. So if us 3 here conspire and we say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to deal drugs on this side of the room, which is an offense. There's 3 of us, we're talking about it. And we're going to do this for a long period of time to make a lot of money. So it's not a single event. It's been multiple events. We're considered a gang, but illegally we're considered an organized crime group. So you'll see whenever we do these big raids, we don't say we're charging them for being a gang. Being a gang is not illegal just by being a gang. What's illegal is being a criminal organization. So we're a criminal organization, but it goes down to definition like you asked, right? And definitions of gangs. There's a reason there is no global definition of a gang wherever you go legally. All right, and I'll get to that reason why it is. But with this, we got gang members. We know what gangs do. Well, the second part of our problem here, or our solution, finding mission, I should say, was, okay, so we got to get a gang member out of a gang. Number one, what is a gang? We kind of know what a gang is now, right? So we have a clear picture. It's not the kids that are playing basketball in the street. It's not the kids here that are outside maybe playing cricket, maybe playing basketball, maybe playing cards, maybe hanging out by the mosque, or maybe hanging. Those are not gang members. All right, if they're not doing this, that doesn't fit the bill for us. But the second part for us became, okay, we kind of know what we're doing now. Well, where do we go in the city of Toronto? And some of you might have wondered, why are we in your community? Some of you know. Some of you say, we're gang impacted for sure, but how did we end up here? Well, how we ended up here is very different than just gang activity. When we talk to officers, we talk to people we respected in the criminal justice field, not just as law enforcement officers, but probation and parole officers, corrections officers, social workers, provincial workers, and we said, where are all the gang hotspots? Everybody gave us the same things you guys said. Right? We all said the same thing. Wherever you want to go, we all said the same thing. You say all these different neighborhoods. We all know those are gang neighborhoods for us, but we don't know that. So we have to get a little bit back from them and say, okay, how do we be the most effective and how do we find places? Well, this is a map of the city of Toronto. It's been broken down into 140 neighborhoods. Has anybody seen this map before? So this map, and I'll tell you these colors in these 140 neighborhoods. This was broken down and this was provided by the city of Toronto. They did this back in 2014, 2016. They looked at the city, and what they did with the city is they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to break down the city into neighborhoods, and we're going to look at each individual neighborhood, and we're going to base them on what's called an equity score. We want to see in these neighborhoods, what is their equity score? And the equity score was based off of a few things, but I'll give you some of the big ones that stand out to me. It was based off of what does the average household look like in terms of who is there? Is mom and dad both there? Are they not there? Are they new immigrants or are they established Canadians who've been here for generations? What is the average median income? How many kids are in the household? What is the access to economic opportunity? What is their access to transportation to economic opportunity? And what is the general opinion of the community of their voice being heard in terms of the development of their neighborhood?
Is education one of the factors?
Education is one of the factors in there as well. Now, that all being said, they broke down the city into 140 neighborhoods and they gave them all scores. All right, and these scores, the ones in orange, the ones in yellow, these were the 31 low equitable neighborhoods. So what they said is there's kind of a baseline. Well, these 31 neighborhoods, they're below that baseline. So the good news is in 2020, the City of Toronto, through their community safety and well-being strategy, called the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy, is pumping in millions of dollars of resources, not in just terms of money, but opportunities and restructuring and developing programs for these 31 neighborhoods. Now, this is the interesting part. We saw this map, and we said, okay, let's take a look at something here on the side. And the thing we looked at on the side is police officers. We looked at crime data. We said, where are the gangs that we know live? Where do these gangs commit their violent acts, mostly? Where do they come from? Where do they go? How does it go back and forth? Now, if I were to take that gang map of crimes and where they live, and I were to take this map here, it's almost identical. That's not by accident. That's not a coincidence. Yes, ma'am.
Which number are we?
You guys would be, I think, right around here. I think 125
No.
or 126.
43 or 44.
Where are you guys? 43? Oh, right here? Oh, there you are. Sorry, yeah.
There's Don
Somewhere in
there.
there.
You're right here. Now, if you go to our website, torontogangprevention.ca, we have a link to this entire database. So if you want to see the demographics of your neighborhood, it's all there. It breaks it all down for you. It tells you the 2014 demographics, I believe, and they might have the 2018 ones up. It'll show you what's happening in your neighborhood. It also tells you the languages that are spoken the most in here, what is the breakdown in terms of culture and religion, and all that other good stuff. It tells you all there. But all that stuff aside, now we had an objective way of knowing what communities do we need to focus on. Not only because we know gang activities there, but we also know that these are areas that are going to be improved and where the city's already paying attention to. Yes, sir.
What's the color mean?
Orange means you're on the lower scale of the lower equity scores, and yellow means you're almost near the middle, all right, or an acceptable level. So if you see yellow and orange, it just means these are areas that are considered low equity, all right, based off of the factors I gave you before. And on the website, our website will give you a link to Community Safety Toronto. You can take a look at it, and it breaks down exactly how they scored it, what process they did, and most importantly, what are they going to do starting in 2020? Yes, ma'am. It's based off of police intelligence, where gang members reside, where they conduct their gang activity. It's also based off of confidential information for where gang activities are conspiring to do activity. It's also based on historical data, gang arrests, gang incidents, homicides that we can relate back to gang activity. But those gang activities, that handout you have there, the color one, the printout, that'll tell you the top gang activities that gang members actually do. So it's all of those. It could be assault, car thefts, robberies, shootings, firearm possession, drug trafficking. There's a boatload of offenses. There's not just one offense that says gang offense. So when it comes down to measuring impact, it's based off of individual level. If you have been a victim of a gang crime, can I put a number to your impact level? I'll tell you this. If numbers are important, but they're absolutely not everything. Okay, metrics do not capture emotion and trauma and impact. And this is our 16th town hall, and yesterday was our 15th, but yesterday was also our 9th parent who lost a kid to gang violence. Now, you tell me if you are that parent and I say to you, well, your score of impact is 94. I don't care. That to me is irrelevant. What's relevant is what do we do to stop this from happening again? Right? That's the relevancy. Yes, sir.
Do you
historically, is it the same colors 10 years ago in the same places?
There's no historic comparison, right? So
There's no historic.
there's no historic comparison, right, that we know of right now. This is new data. So you,
Can't tell if it's getting better or not.
this is 2014, so we're looking at benchmark data that's going to be from here, all right, from what we know at this point. And realistically, even if historically it was any worse, would that change anything?
You know what I'm saying?
That's assumption, right? And here's the thing.
Yeah, I'm saying
Yeah.
you don't have any.
Yeah. No, listen. And these are great questions asked. I'll tell you why is when you're measuring any sort of success in the relevancy of gangs or crime prevention in total, all right, there has to be a third independent body that has to come in and measure this for you. They have to do the evaluation. The other part is that third independent body might be looking for metrics. Those metrics, again, don't tell the complete picture. I'll tell you why. Let's just say we were to go out and we were to flood this area and we came up with a strategy or tactic to stop gang violence, and gang violence stopped for 3 months, and we just used that 3 months as our tracking period. And a year from now, we were to say, whoa, our crimes are up 2,000% based off of the last year. There's many other things that came into play. I'll tell you, there's a book, and it has nothing to do with opinion or like that. It's an example of a book I had read a long time ago that that really paints the picture of problem and solution. Problem and solution. There's a book that's called Freakonomics. I don't know if anybody's read it. It's a fantastic book. And do you remember the abortion study?
Yeah.
So vaguely. So I'll give you the idea. So there was this one city in the United States, and Freakonomics, it's a book from economists who decided we're going to look at real life, and we're going to see what's happening in real life when it comes down to the mind of economies and how are we tracking things and where is true impact and true measure. And there was this city in the United States, and for about 18 years, or 15 years I'll say, there was tremendous spikes in crime. It kept getting greater and greater every year, like at a ridiculous portion. And what happened is police in that area, the city, the schools, everybody participated in individual activities to say, we're going to combat this. We're going to go after this, and we're going to measure this for 3 years. And over the course of 3 years, what they found was crime dropped significantly. It dropped. And everybody did this. We did it. We did it. The school said we did it. The police said we did it. Everybody else said we did it. Well, when they brought in true independent objective eyes to say, what happened to change this? What they had found was 18 years prior, the state that they were in legalized abortion. And the impact was that the children that were most likely to grow up in poverty and most likely become criminals at a later point in life were just never born. Right? So when we look at problems and solutions, we have to look much deeper than what is in front of us. So I call this the surface level. And we all get stuck at the surface level, all of us and everything. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the question is to say, what then? What's behind that? And then what? And at some point, if you're true about it, you can ask that question forever. And at some point, we got to take a hard stop. It's okay, we have to work from here. All right. And then we can have the luxury of time when everything slows down to say, all right, let's dig past this now. Now we have some breathing room, and let's figure out the next thing. And to summarize a lot of stuff, and all, I don't want to jump the gun, but our strategy is complex in framework, but simple in what you need to do. It just needs to be described because we all don't need to do everything. We need to do our individual part. So as parents, you need to do your individual part. As a teacher, you need to do your individual part. As a police officer, we need to do our part. We can't go like this, well, there's a gang problem here and they got to do something and they have to do something. If the gang problem is coming from within as if it's in your family, that's where it starts. We have to start from there. You have to play your part in the solution for it. And that's the framework of this. And the second part of this became, well, what makes a gang member, right? And we found this publication in Public Safety Canada. It's from 2007. Again, it's on our website. Every publication I referenced today is on there. We have a publication section for anybody to read. It's fantastic and they're easy to read. You have that, laminated card in front of you. It's called the gang risk factors. So that gang risk factors, I'll break it down for you like this. When we had described and we talked about the reasons why kids might join gangs, and we looked at what a gang member looks like, and we looked at where they might live. Those gang risk factor cards from Public Safety Canada, again, it was done from a study from all over the world, from academics. It wasn't a police officer, it wasn't a police agency, it was PhDs who had spent the majority of their academic career exploring gangs and finding commonalities. What they found is all over the world, these are the things that gang members had in common. all these risk factors. Now, if you take a look at that laminated card and you read that right now, is there anything there that surprises you? And here's the way you read it. You look at it, and I want you to think that there's a little box beside it. And I want you to think of a person, one person, it could be yourself, and I want you to imagine checking off every single box. Just check off every single box of those risk factors, and then ask yourself, what is the likelihood that this person is going to grow up healthy and is going to be a productive member of society and is going to live their dream and going to contribute? Or is this person going to become a criminal or a gang member? And if you look at those, the more you check off, the less hopeful it gets for the person. So gang members suffer from all of these risk factors from the age of 0 all the way up, but they don't happen like that. They don't happen in terms of it comes at once. There's this idea sometimes that all of a sudden a 12-year-old kid had a perfect life, and then one day they were badly influenced at school and they decided to chase a different lifestyle. That's not how it works. It doesn't work that way. Where it does start is the age of 0. Now these are the risk factor categories. And Jason and I would get called all the time from our higher ups in the Toronto Police Service to say, what does the program look like? What does the program look like? And we'd say, there is no program. This isn't about an individual program. There is not one single thing that'll solve this problem. There's 5 risk factor categories on that card. You see 6 on the card because we have major ones that count as like 2 points. All right, everyone else is 1 point. Now these 5 categories, if I were to give you 5, anybody here really good at math? Yeah. Yes, this is my guy right here, all right? Now I'm going to ask you a hard question. So if I had these 5 categories, how many numbers of times can I make different combinations of this? So exponentially. So how many, if I had 5, let's say these risk factor categories, right? How many different combinations of this can I make? That's of all 5, right? But we can make a lot, right? I'll tell you the actual number, 5 to the power 4. 25 based off of these 5s, but a 0 to 6-year-old doesn't have these, right? But a 0 to 9-year-old has both of these. So now we have 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 9, right? As we go on exponentially. The total number of different combinations of all of these, just the 5 risk factor category, is 3,125. So when we get asked, what is the program? If I had a single program to solve 3,125 programs, I wouldn't be here, right? I would go write a book. I'd go on Oprah. I'd be on tour. I'd be living on a beach somewhere because I would have had a solution to a worldwide epidemic. Because these risk factors, they don't just apply to gang members. They apply to the worst of the worst. They apply to people who make the worst decisions possible. I wish I had a solution. I don't have a solution here. But we know there's 5. Now, in those 5 categories are a total of 36 risk factors. So if we can do 5 to the power 5 is 3,125, what is 36 to the power 36? It's 150 unvigatillion, which is 150 with 69 zeros after it. So these simple surface level solutions to gangs being ban handguns, get them jobs. If it was that simple, do you think we'd have a problem that we do have today? It's not that simple. So we need to evolve with the times and we need to get in touch with what's actually happening besides what makes us feel good. It makes us feel good to say we did this individual thing and this is going to solve the problem. And then we get totally frustrated when it doesn't have the impact that we expected it to have. That's okay. That might be his girlfriend. he's so nervous. Yeah, he's gonna just go. He's gonna go, honey. Oh, it's a bad time.
Never happened.
No. Yeah. Well. Anyways, the point of this is we have these, right? And I'm going to explain them to you. This doesn't happen all at one point. So if you look at the family risk factor category, I'll tell you a quick story. Just so you can look at and say, this is what I should be looking out for. Not only for you as a family member, as a parent, as a caregiver, it could be aunt, uncle, grandma, it doesn't matter who you are. But these are things to look for within your own family. From the age of 0 to 6 in the family risk factor category, the biggest indicator is a 3-year-old who's out of control. I'm not talking about the 3-year-old who pees all over the toilet seat. I'm talking about the 3-year-old who punches the walls, who kicks everything, who bites people, who steals stuff. That's the first sign that something is not okay. That's a behavioral issue. And if you look at the family risk factor categories, there's about 8 risk factors in there. Now the thing is, that kid might be showing that, but you got to pay attention to everything else and say, are all these other things in place? Right? But what happens is that 3-year-old keeps that way. Right, and these young kids between the ages of 0 to 7, this is psychologically and biologically proven, is we all operate at what's called a theta wave, which means that we operate on a state of hypnosis. And in that state of hypnosis from 0 to 7, we're just subconsciously collecting data. And that data is not telling us what we need to do to become a doctor or engineer or lawyer. It's saying, what do I need to survive? How do I get through this day and not die? That's what that information is being collected. Now, this 3-year-old who's doing that is firing and wiring like that, I want you to picture their home life. So when you have a 3-year-old that's out of control, does anybody know a 3-year-old like that? It doesn't have to be yours. It might be your friends or your sisters or your brothers or somebody in your family that you don't like.
We know one who was like that, who is actually now part of the gang.
Ah, perfect. Now let's use this person. Is it a boy or a girl? Boy, perfect. So we have you said you know somebody's like that who's now part of a gang. That 3-year-old who was like that, what was home like? So dad's at home, but you said it was chaotic. What does chaotic mean? So no modeling, no behavior, no correction, no skill building, no confidence building. Okay, that's 3. That's 3. So I'll ask you this before we jump ahead. Is it surprising that he's part of a gang?
Oh, no, not at all.
Not at all, right? But that 3-year-old, to that parent, to that family, are they aware of all what's happening in your opinion?
At the time,
No, not at the time. Should they have been aware?
yeah. In retrospect, they are.
But at the time they weren't, right? So that 3-year-old, they're firing and wiring, and they know when I do naughty things. How did those parents react when their kid did naughty things? Did they yell at them? Did they sit down and get eye level and say like, listen, you can't do this. This is not healthy.
They yelled at them.
Yeah.
The father gave them consequences, and the mother undermined.
So you had discouraging, you had difference of opinion, right? So this 3-year-old, all of a sudden, they become 6. They're in grade 1 or kindergarten. Oh, sorry, I'll go back to this. The 3-year-old all of a sudden become, they become 6. They're in grade 1 or kindergarten. Their behavior at home, is it the same or different at school? It's the same. Who's a replacement for a parent in the school? Any teachers here or educators? No? So anybody in the teaching environment? I love teachers. They're one of my favorite people in the world. But that's a difficult job. Now you're teaching a grade 1, and that same kid in your grade 1 class, when there's now 29 other kids, what is that doing to the school classroom? It's disrupting the environment. The teachers are losing their hair. They grab the kid, put him on the side, and they bring in a separate person. So now this kid has been isolated from everybody and continues to go on. And that's at the age of 6. All right, so this kid's been a pain in the butt. Now that kid that at what age was he out and playing on his own?
What do you mean? Oh,
So what I mean is, like, for those of us with kids there, at what age was this kid told go outside? Under 10, right? So academically proven all across the world at the age of 9. Age of 9 is where we get to the peer group. All right, so now imagine this, that same kid, and we listen.
yeah.
That same kid, 3 years old, pain in the butt, 6 years old, failed school, causing more problems. And then 8 or 9, parents say, what, you have too much energy, go dump your energy. Get out of here. So this kid takes off. Now this kid's out for the first time, maybe 7, 8, 9, maybe even younger. It's Toronto, it's different. Are they finding other kids like them or less kids like them? Yeah, because guess who else is out there? A whole other bunch of 8-year-olds who parents told them the same thing, you have too much energy, get out of here. Right now I want you to picture this kid, man, in school you have no friends. Okay, at home, nobody talks to you unless you're in trouble. Now you go outside, 9 years old, and you find a whole bunch of other 9-year-olds that are exact same as you, and now for the first time this kid's like, oh man, I found people like me. And now you got a group of people doing what's called at the age of 9, the biggest indicator is child delinquency. So 9-year-olds who go out and they push another 9-year-old and they take their money and say, if you tell me they're going to punch you, what do we call that? Bullying, right? All across the bullying. You know what that's called if you're over the age of 12? That's called a robbery. So delinquency is a term used for children under the age of 12 that just means they're doing criminal acts. So we're already seeing future behavior being practiced right now at the age of 8 or 9, but everybody just says, what? That's bullying. We're going to tolerate this. It's boys being boys. That's okay. It's not okay. They're practicing these criminal acts in a group environment. We talked about what is a gang? 3 or more people conspiring to commit a serious offense for the purpose of money. You have 3 or more people doing and practicing delinquent, aka criminal acts for the purpose of practicing. All right, so now you have these 9-year-olds practicing these acts, and schools, again, I love schools. They got to do what they got to do. Our hands are tied. Under the age of 12, our hands are tied. We can still arrest kids under the age of 12, but we try not to. We don't charge them. But there's bigger issues if there. If we have to put handcuffs on a 12-year-old, there's big issues. If we have to put handcuffs on an 8-year-old, there's massive issues. So now this kid's out. He's with a group of guys. He's in the community. And even yourself here, if you live in a building where there's a shared space where all these kids congregate, have you seen a group of 8 or 9-year-old kids running around like animals? And what do? You avoid them, right? Right? Say, these guys are a pain in the butt. You know where they live, you know who they belong to, but they're also a pain in the butt. So it becomes not worth your energy to say, man, I got enough on my plate today. I don't want to deal with this. Yeah. Listen, the common theme here, and you guys are all right, is we're all seeing this.
Yeah.
all of us know what's going to happen. All of us. And when it does happen, what do we say? Not surprised. And here, let's expand on that. Let's actually look at that. Okay, so even when we're talking about here, there's a sense of defeat. All right, everybody goes from being really motivated, I'm learning, to, well, nobody's doing it. Well, yeah, it's because of this, it's because of that. We listen, we know. The point is we have to remind ourselves we know what the right thing and the wrong thing is to do. We know what the right thing and the wrong thing is to do. We cannot expect inherently children to know, even though they know what the right thing and wrong thing is to do. We're the adults. In that lobby, I'm not saying you go invade somebody's house and you say, learn how to parent your kid. What I'm saying is that lobby in your building is as much yours as it is everybody else's. I want you to think and view that lobby as this is my house. And am I going to tolerate this behavior? I'm not saying you got to yell at a kid. I'm not saying that either. I'm not saying you have to be the discipliner. What I'm saying is you need to engage in letting know what a standard of tolerance is and a standard of expectation is here. This is how we behave in this room. This is how we behave in this building. All right, and they got to know. And they got to know uniformly. Now, it's difficult if there's a group of kids that are behaving very well. So whoever's parents for those, you're doing a fantastic job. But if those kids were out of line, do you think legitimately we're all just going to ignore it and not address it here in this room? I never said this is going to be easy.
No.
This is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
It's not impossible.
I have to say.
Listen, it's not impossible. It's difficult. It's definitely not. It's definitely doable. But here's the problem. Was anybody else there with you when you were doing this? By yourself, right?
Just the woman that they were intimidating and myself.
Now those 3 girls, do you think that's the first time they did that?
Oh, no way.
Do you think you're the first person to ever talk to them? 100% probably. I'll tell you that right now, 100% probably. Now, if those 3 girls get on the elevator again, they try that, and now you say something to them. They get on the elevator, they try something. You say something, They're going to start to understand, I can't do this here. This isn't tolerated at some point. I'm not saying you do. What I'm saying is I want you to start thinking about addressing things when you see them in a safe way, in a way. But uniformly across the board, everybody in this room has to commit together. Rather than getting together in a residents association and saying this is what we're going to plan, you need to develop a standard and a code of conduct and say, are we all agreeing to abide by this? Are we all going to agree that at every moment that we see somebody not abiding by this, we are going to take the ownership to address it? I'm not saying you have to stop at a police. I'm saying you just have to do something, maybe say something politely and say, hey, that's not okay. You can walk away after that. You don't even have to say anything. I want you to be comfortable with what you're saying, but I'm saying, I'm trying to get you to think about all these things that inherently we're seeing that we think somebody else needs to fix. If that's your lobby, if that's your elevator, if that's where you live, start getting in the mindset of these are my problems and the responsibility of me, regardless of how this problem ended up in front of me, it's my responsibility now to make this work for me. There's so many components of this, right? And in the other component to that too is when I'm saying engage and address it, we all want to go to this area of stern discipline and enforcement action. You don't have to do that. You can engage in positive conversation. It works effectively well. I want you to picture that same kid. Teenagers are different, all right? I don't know what to do there. I tell you what works with kids that are young, under the age of 10, that are easily influenced, that are operating at a bit of a still maturing and developing mind. They react so well to positive engagement because where are they getting it from? That's foreign to them, right? So immediately what happens is when you have a kid that's like that, 7 or 8 or 9, and you say something positive, all right? You say, listen, you got a lot of energy, man. That's pretty cool. Whatever you say, however you say it, that's totally up to you. What they do immediately is they kind of get off guard. Have you ever seen that? They get really uncomfortable. They get off guard. They get a bit standoffish because for a lot of them, their association with positive words leads to some level of manipulation. So when they hear somebody say something positive, sometimes without them even knowing, they go, what do you want from me? Right? But consistency in behavior, consistency in expectation, not wanting anything, being true to who you are. I promise you, if you invest in planting small positive seeds, your relationships tend to change. And you'd be surprised what the impact you can have on one person does for a greater cause. All right? So with us, we'll move past this 9-year-old. We already know what the problems are. I don't have to educate you on this. You know that. You described it to me. What you described to me is no different than the east or the west end of the city or north to south. It doesn't matter if you have $1 billion or $0. We're all looking at the same thing. Now this kid between 9 and 15, something happens, all right? And then we go to the peer group and we go down to individual. All right, now that's 15 years old. And here's the biggest indicator. So we know at 3 in the family risk factor, it's a kid who's out of control. At 6, it's in school, they're failing. Like they're failing school, they're not doing good at all. At 9, they're out and about and they're starting to practice criminal acts. Well, at 15, they tell you they're a gang member. It's not a secret. They don't hide themselves well. They're very proud of the fact that I belong to a gang. Very proud. They'll tell you if you ask them. It is their identity. They are no longer an individual. They are an individual who's part of an organization that's a bigger cause, a potential family. That's who these guys are. They'll tell you. If you don't know that, and you're on social media, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, and you see them, it's all over. There's no secret. It's like they're advertising water for sale. Right, here it is. This is who I am. They're very proud of it, so they tell you that. But the question is now, what happens between 9 and 15? What happens between 9 and 15? Many different things happen. The delinquency goes in. They don't do well at school. Now we have the individual and the peer group risk factor categories coming in. They have horrible friends that are like-minded. They commit violent acts. There's still no support at home. There's no structure because they've never adopted into the school environment from the age of kindergarten on. They have little to no academic success, and then they get manipulated because they're still left outside. And who do they get manipulated and recruited into gangs by? Other gang members. Now those other gang members are the exact same as these guys. So they can look back and say, oh, I remember when I was 12 and I was like this guy doing the exact same thing, and I know how to talk to this guy. So they do the same thing, they butter them up. But this time, when they butter them up, there's still that initial reaction of, what do you want from me? And they wait. They butter them up more. They give them gifts. They give them tasks. They make them feel good. And then the manipulation starts. So the initial reaction of, what do you want from me? It's true and it's 100% real. And they get manipulated into doing more and more violent things. And then they become a 15-year-old gang member in school. And those delinquent acts that they were practicing at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, now they're 12. Now they're doing robberies. They're drug trafficking. They're shooting people as they get to 15. And then we're arresting them. When we arrest them, they go through the court process. They get bail and parole or probation. They go out and about. They continue on that cycle, and it just becomes a revolving door. And then at the age of 18 in the risk factor categories, and all those risk factors are compounding. I'll get back to that. They're all compounding, which means they just tend to grow. All right, so if there's 8 risk factors, then it becomes 15, then it becomes 20, then it becomes 25, then it becomes 30, then it becomes 36, all right, as they get a little bit older. And now we get down to the community risk factor, and the biggest indicator when this is a big problem is exactly where we're at now. Where when you look at the news, you look at newspapers, what's on the headlines? Shootings, murder, homicide, gang death. When it bleeds over into the community and it starts happening to absolutely innocent people, when it starts getting into areas that were previously never known for gangs or gang shootings, it's a problem. All right, now here's the thing. As I've given you that life cycle of this kid from 0 to 12, how many people were engaged in there? How many people tolerated the behavior? How many? All of us. But we wait until right here before we say somebody has to do something. And then right here, you have a bunch of cops. I never went to school for child psychology. I don't know how to deal with that. But there's no urgency to deal with it. Right?
Yeah, right.
There's no urgency.
Affect you, so
You say, kids being kids. Oh, teenagers being teenagers. Oh, it's not my kid. Right? And then they'll go out of it. Oh, they'll move on. They'll end up in jail. Let them keep going to police. Yeah, man, I get it. We're all there. We're all on the same page here. But the real problem is, it's not about that individual kid at this point when it gets to here. It's about everybody else. All right, so again, out of the 15 or 16 town halls we've done now, 9 of them have had a parent who lost their kid. 9 of them. Now, I want you to think of yourself. Don't think of yourself, because I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But when I talk to those parents of kids that they lost in gun and gang violence, out of the 9 of them, 6 of them found their own kid. They were killed by this kid. But when I look at the life cycle, and we actually talk about a solution here, everybody who had a chance to say or do something decided it wasn't their problem. And as a result of nobody stepping up to the plate of having a standard of conduct in their own house, being your own lobby, being saying things for what they are, positively engaging or negatively, however you feel fit for you. Then we have a parent who has to go to their front driveway and find their kid dead and shot and killed in the chest. And every time everybody said, not my problem, not my problem, it becomes somebody's problem. And that's the problem, is because we never know who that somebody is going to be. It could be you. It could be your neighbor. It could be your best friend. It could be your family. It could be your niece. It could be your nephew. In this day and age, it could be anybody. So there's a serious problem. Well, when we start to look at what are the solutions here. Solutions is the key word with an S at the end. We expanded our gang exit strategy. We renamed it. We said it's not a gang exit strategy, it's a gang prevention strategy. But gang prevention involves many facets because our goal is to focus on that 0 to 7. All right, is to find the right people, to identify the families, to identify the kids that are at most risk of becoming 18-year-old killers or 15-year-old killers. And our goal is to get in there and to really strengthen that family unit as best as we can. All right, but we're not the people to do it. We're going to have access to it because we have police information. People call 911. We kind of already know even ourselves sometimes who's going to end up that way. It is, what do you do about it? Those risk factors, there's the opposite of those, and how you solve those and what the enemy is of the risk factors is a protective factor. All of those risks, there's an equal opposite on the other side, right? There's equality, there's balance, there's harmony somewhere. And that harmony could take many forms. It could be teachers, it could be positive connections to adult role models, it could be drug counseling, it could be as small and as out of the box as this. I spoke to a physician and we talked about children who have poor academic performance, right, starting from the age of kindergarten. And this came up in a casual conversation. And he just casually brought it up and he goes, yeah. And he goes, I'll tell you why some of the kids he has dealt with in low-income areas have problems with educational aspiration. He said, ask them the last time they had an eye exam. They had an eye exam. So if you have a 6-year-old kid who can't see as clear as he knows, and he doesn't know how to communicate, never been to an eye doctor, parents never been to an eye doctor, never even had the sense to say, I got to get my kid for a checkup before school starts to make sure their eyes are good. And you talk about the low connection to school if they can't read the words on a page. And then we have teenagers who can't read, period, and are so educationally frustrated. And then you've asked them at the age of 15, when have you had an eye exam? Is outside of the box as that is? And they said, what are you talking about? And then they get glasses and you realize, oh, they've never seen anything before. Like, we really got to get creative and really got to start picking the brains of everybody outside of law enforcement. Our job in this entire thing, our role is the very last part. All right, that's 100% for us. That is for us from 15 on. For the most violent people, it's the police. That's what we're there for. But I want to go through some prevention strategy. I'm going to show you where it works. So preventing crime. 18-year-old who has all these risk factors. We're past the stage of prevention. Okay, we're past it. The prevention is not the go-to there. 0 to about 15 is prevention, or works the best. Academically proven, evaluated, 0 to 15. Every prevention effort that works between ages 0 to 15, you're getting the biggest return for success. You're getting a 50% turnover rate. So if we focus on prevention from the ages of 0 all the way up to 15, identifying how is this person going down this path, and then we drop in a whole bunch of prevention programs based off of those risk factors, we're going to get great results. The second component outside of prevention is this, intervention. All right, and that starts from the ages of kind of 12 all the way up to 18 plus. And what intervention is we talk a lot about preventing kids from getting involved in gangs because that's the end goal. All right, that is the golden model. That is first place for us, is how do we stop a kid from 0 to 7 to get into a gang? But guess what? We had a conversation earlier where I think you had mentioned when I said a gang member gets arrested and they're out the next day. Yeah. We have tens of thousands of people that are either gang members or at risk of gang involvement that are currently in the criminal justice system. You're almost 70% more likely to reoffend if you're part of a gang compared to normal people who just commit criminal acts. So we have this pocket of 10,000 people, sometimes kids, young adults, later adults, that have grown up without growing up and that are sitting in this criminal justice system that constantly are in and out. They can't be forgotten either. You can't just negate those people. Right? It's like this, when you go to your family doctor now and they start doing checkups on you and your kid now and they say, listen, you have to change your diet or you risk getting diabetes. Change your diet or you risk, getting heart disease. Change your, start exercising, you're going to have bad hips or whatever you need for your need. They're telling you stuff to prevent that from happening. What about everybody who already has diabetes and bad hips and back problems? You don't just forget those people. Well, it's the same thing with gang members. We can't just forget those people that are in it because they're going to come out and they're going to do more crimes and they're going to victimize more people. We have to still address that. But for a certain percentage of the population, 15 and up, it's suppression, which is a word of enforcement. There is an absolute necessity to hold violent people accountable for what they do. That's not even debatable. If you have a gun if you pull a trigger, if you're dealing in drugs, if you have weapons, if you're stealing cars, you're committing break and enters, you're doing robberies, unfortunately, you did it, you're going to have to face the repercussion, you're going to have to be held accountable. But now we're evolving to say, how do we stop this from happening again? Well, let's take a look at your personal life history. Let's find all these risk factors you've had that you might not even be aware of, and how do we combat that? How do we find the equal side of that? How do we provide the harmony for you and balance so you can see something bigger for you on the outside? And I'll tell you this, we can't do this by ourselves. There's no way. Absolutely no way. But what we did find in the United States is we found a gold model standard that says you need to framework this entire solution, because this solution is not a police problem. Not all of it. We are the very tail end. And by the time it gets to us, we got to do what we got to do, but we never wanted to get here. That framework has a pool. And that pool is all these different ingredients. These are the ingredients in that pool. You have community mobilization, which is doing what we're doing now. The purpose of these town halls was to advertise and educate people on our framework and what we've learned over the last couple of years. And I can go through on in-depth for hours about what we've learned in the nitty-gritty, but we don't have time for that, and I don't want to overwhelm people. But the framework is this. Community mobilization, the purpose of this is not just to educate you, it's to get a buy-in, but it's also to identify community leaders. We don't know what's happening on the inside out. We don't know what the impacts are 100%. We know from the outside in, but we're never going to know from the inside out. So it's to find community leaders like yourself who've taken the time out of your Thursday to show up on a busy day to say, I'm so concerned about this, I want to learn more, I want to do more. Because as law enforcement in some of the most gang-impacted areas, there's no trust. And we're okay with that. Because who here has called police when they've had extra birthday cake at home? Has anybody dialed 911 and said, yeah, whoever says, oh, yeah, but you brought them cookies, but have you ever had fresh cookies in the oven and said, listen, I need the cops here ASAP in 15 minutes. I got fresh cookies and we're going to have a great time. No. People call police for horrible situations. So automatically when you see a police car, you get nervous because there's an association. Listen, that's okay. We're not here to develop trust everywhere. You might trust me, you might trust Jason, which I don't think you should, but you might trust me and you might say, I like Ron or I like Nilo, but you don't like the Toronto Police. And that's okay. Why would we waste our efforts? We don't have time for this. We're trying to build trust in the community and trying to understand the dynamics of the community. When we have people like you in the room who already have the trust, who already have the influence, who already know what's happening from the inside out. Our goal is to stay back and say, okay, these are the risk factors. You tell us what's happening in your community. Let us use our network to bring in the support and the resources that you need. So if you say, we got kids loitering, yeah, we can send extra police cars there, but what else? Kids have nothing to do. Great, we bring in the city of Toronto. If you live in community housing and it's dirty and there's some areas that there's not enough light, we bring in community housing. You got to fix this. All these partner groups that we've gained partnerships with are all very committed to solving this problem collectively because we all have interest into it. Opportunities provision, I'll ask you this for any of those who know gang kids or gangs on that line. Are they unintelligent? They're very intelligent, some of them. The gang leaders are CEOs. What do you think about this? You're a leader of a gang. You have a posse of misfits. And they take direction from you. That's a pretty big feat. Right? That's a very big feat. That's a charismatic person who has vision and who can sell people on their vision and beliefs, and people will blindly follow that to the extent they'll kill somebody for this person. How crazy is that? But here's the problem. Not everybody abides by traditional education. Majority of us do, and that's fantastic for the majority of us that believe and buy into and accommodate this education system. But these kids don't come from the same place we came from. They have different obstacles and demons they have to deal with. So really, it might be looking at different opportunities to bring back into communities and neighborhoods to say, hey man, this might be a way out in terms of a path for you. I went to one community we've been working with a couple of years ago, and it was very mom-driven, very gang-impacted community. And the mom said, we would just want our kids to get into trades. Plumbers, carpenters, electricians. And my question to them was, do they want to do that? So you want to create the career for your kid who's going to spend the rest of their life doing all this stuff, but you've never even asked them, what do you want to do? And when they come back and they tell you, I want to do this and I want to do that. Listen, I'm on LinkedIn. And I was last night I was talking to my wife about it, and I had random people will request to follow you right on LinkedIn if you're not on it. It's like a business social media. So it's like a business Facebook, and I got like 3 requests last night, and I had no idea what the job titles were. It was like Chief Dream Officer. Who is this? Like, what job is this, right? So even for myself, I don't know 90% of the jobs that are out there right now. I have no idea. And in 5 years from now, I'm going to have no idea what jobs are coming out there. But they do, because they're creating those jobs. So the idea is to look at the opportunities outside of the traditional means, where for most of us, I can tell you as an immigrant child, a parent, as a child of immigrants, my career options, I had 5 options in life, all right, from a very young age. I was told, listen, lawyer, engineer, doctor, police officer, or failure. All right, and failure was just the option to say, like, you're dead to us if you're a failure. Like, you're dead. We're not even going to acknowledge you. And you're cropped out of all the family pictures, right? You don't even include here. I didn't know what my other options are. If I had known there was other options, I probably wouldn't have been a cop, because these were the options presented to me. But this is where I am now, and these are all the things I've learned. Well, it's almost as parents being open to the idea of there's something else out there that might not be in line with my vision, but if they're passionate about it, they're dedicated, and that's going to keep them off the track of this garbage, that's fine. You go nuts. You go crazy. They'll figure it out. They're very resilient. So it's creating new opportunities. Social intervention is exactly that. It's intervening on a very social level. Suppression is what we do. Crime management, going after bad guys and bad girls where people make bad decisions. And then organizational change and development, which is absolutely massive for us. So part of these town halls is we have conversations, we tell stories, people give us their feedback, and even us as police officers, we're starting to take back a lot of tremendous insight for how we can better serve communities that we're into. What are things that we're missing? What are things that we could do better? And in some of the most hard-hitting communities, it's the smallest things. But we end up going back and we say we need to start changing this stuff. So for example, last night we were in a neighborhood, and one of the community members had said, you know what, you were in front of my building, you had your police screen on, and I saw who you were here for. Right, so on our police screens, it might say we have a radio call. Somebody called 911 because there's a person with a gun in an apartment building, and this is the apartment number, and has the person's name on there, maybe a phone number, and maybe a picture of the person. All right, and generally cops will go to that, and sometimes people turn it off, but sometimes people are such a rush they leave it on. All right, now what are the downsides to that? That person might have friends that say the police are coming looking for you. Get out of here. Or somebody else might see it and might jump to conclusion and say, man, that's 100% true. So it's small things like that that we're starting to get cognizant of when we go back. It's also organizational change of behavior for everybody else, and I'll tell you who everybody else is. The framework that we have says you need to incorporate everybody that's impacted. So when we looked at the life cycle of a kid from the age of 0 to 18 plus in Toronto that's a gang member, we have to look at all the organizations that this person has dealt with in their life is 0 to 18. You got us, Toronto Police Service. You have the City of Toronto, the Ministry of the Attorney General, which is all the prosecution services in the court system. Right, they're impacted. Ministry of Children and Youth Services on the provincial level. Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services, being the jails, right, for kids and everybody else. They're impacted because when these kids get arrested, they go into these different institutions. The Toronto District School Board, the Toronto Catholic District School Board, Safe and Caring Schools Toronto, because kids are in school when they're not with their parents. CAMH, why would we incorporate CAMH? Mental health. Mental health. You know, a lot of these kids that we've dealt with, they have an intense amount of anxiety, an intense amount of PTSD, especially for some of the things that they've either been involved in or seen or been victim of, that they carry over, right? And it's a massive issue. So we have to incorporate CAMH to understand child psychology and how do we deal with trauma to get it addressed at an early age, and how do we identify going forward. Victim and witness protection. As much as we're talking about gang members that become criminals, they also impact victims. They're also victims of crime. These shootings that are happening right now, they're not all of them, but they're a good percentage of them are gang members doing it to each other. They're still victims of that crime. We don't know what stage or what level that this person is involved in the game. We don't know if they're at the beginning. We don't know if this is day 1 or day 100. Regardless, we still treat them as victims of crime. Faith-based organizations, being religious groups, mosques, churches, gurdwaras, wherever you want to call it, that's a very big part of everybody's life, and that's an influential group that we don't know of. Families go to religious leaders to talk about their problems. Religious leaders have a tremendous insight to what cultural issues that are happening right now. And they're also very influential in those communities. Again, I can't come into any sort of church environment and then advocate and preach. I will not have an impact as much as the religious leader will. So they're very important to include in the solution. Religious institutions, employment programs, community residents, businesses, hospitals, and the media. They all have a part to play. All right, they all have a part to play. So these are just 418, what we're looking at, 16 of the 30 organizations that we've canvassed and consulted with, all across the board. Some of the other ones are Kids Helpful, Children's Aid, a whole bunch that Toronto Community Housing, which I think I already have in there. I don't know if I have it in. there's been so many groups. So all of us have a part to play. So we look at 0 to 18, 0 to 18, we have a part to play as long as we know how to play it. That is our website. If you go on there, we have some videos on there. We have a lot of publications, some how-to guides where you don't need us to solve this problem. And I'll tell you what we do offer on there. Jay and I, 2.5 years ago, when we had really understood these risk factors in depth, we knew where to go. We spent 6 months and we did crash courses for 2,000 frontline police officers in Toronto. Okay, that was our primary focus for 6 months. And what we had done is we told these police officers, if you come across somebody that matches these risk factors, we have a form, talk to the kid or the person or the family, have them contact us if they're into it. It's all volunteer based. And if they are, we're going to try to work with these kids. So we worked with about 70 kids over the last 3 years. And what happens is they send us the risk factors, it's on a form. And through trial and error, what we've done with some of them, not all of them, because it's always evolving, we're still figuring this out, is, and you can do this on your own. On our website, we have all these risk factors. You can go in there, you can take a look. You have that card. Now these risk factors, there's 3 mapping applications in Toronto, all right? And they're all on our website if you go there. There's Toronto, it's called Wellbeing Toronto. There is the Toronto Police Service has one that we have with Ryerson University, and we have Ontario 211. Now, if you click on those mapping applications, it's just a link. It opens up a new web browser. There is a map. You punch in your postal code, and it'll give you all of the free social services where you live. And all we do is we work with the kids and the families to identify the risk factors, and then we find free social services, and we try to connect A and B. So if you've been arrested, yeah, you still have to be held accountable for what you did. But now that we know all of your risk factors, and we'll fill it out with the kids or the parents, or based on what we know, we try to connect people. So if we have kids, for example, or young teenagers that are arrested for violent offenses, that are gang involved, and we determine that they have a low attachment to school, they have educational frustration, they have drug addiction, they have parent criminality, we try to provide them multiple social services for free, or try to refer them to multiple social services within walking distance of where they live. So these will help you out at some point. You don't need us for that. It's all on the website. You can do it absolutely on your own. And the point of that was, our whole program is completely confidential and anonymous. We are working with gang kids, we don't even know their names. It's done through text messages, it's done through phone calls, it's done through emails, it's done through direct messages on social media. And we work with them and we kind of coach them through the process of finding out what's happening to them and what they can do with it afterwards. It's all on our website, it's totally easy to do. What we're finding though is that's really good for surface level stuff, it's very good for one-on-ones, but we're not around 100% of the time. All right, on my messages, sometimes I can't get back to them for weeks at a time because we have so many other obligations right now. We don't have enough people to get this going. But as it evolves, we're learning brand new things every day. We're having brand new successes. And one thing we're learning is the power of word of mouth. It is unbelievable. Whenever we go into different neighborhoods, I'll tell you this, the majority of actual gang members that we have, and here's the part we never anticipated. When we thought about we're going to solicit police officers to go find gang kids and gang members, we honestly thought that we were going to get like that kid who's kind of good but does some bad things and is on the cusp and doesn't know which path he's going to get in life. We have the complete opposite. We have the worst of the worst that don't want to do this, but they're so far deep in, they have no idea how to get out. They legitimately do not know if tomorrow is going to exist for them. Some of us want to dive into one yard, and that's okay. But you still have to be cognizant that there's 2 other fences here, and they're just as important for the entire community. So with this, yeah, we have the 4 different pillars, and our pillars are education, always learning, both educating and relearning back from communities to how to do things better. You have prevention of focusing on identifying the issues going forward. You have intervention of what do we do about the problems that are already here, and you have suppression for what do we do about death that's already here. What do we do about victimization that's already here? All 4 of those have equal roles to play in this. One no greater than the other. But all 4 need to work in harmony, and that's kind of why we're here, is not only just to get that, but these solutions are never going to come from the outside in. I hate to tell you that. Government should not be in your home. Okay? We should not be invading your space. In fact, if anything, we should be supporting family structures as best as possible. I'll tell you the importance of family, and I'll kind of end off on that. And then we can just have a conversation. Any questions you want to ask, any ideas, any impacts you want to share, by all means, that's the time to share. But we had one town hall where we had an ex-gang leader, and we had an ex-gang leader and a survivor of human trafficking. there. And we had this conversation, and it's a great wraparound. Here's the wraparound. When I'd asked both of them, and Liz, you were there for that, and Liz knows the people we're talking about, but when we were there and I asked both of them, I said, what happened for you to get into this lifestyle? Like, just tell me, what happened for you in our private conversation for you to decide to become a gang member or gang leader? And on the other end of it, what happened for you where you think you fell into the victimization of being a victim of human trafficking? And both of them, it was a broken family that got them into that lifestyle. And then the follow-up question was, well, what brought you back to being an ex-gang leader and an ex-trafficking survivor? And for both of them, it was family. The ex-gang leader found a woman, fell in love, said, I don't want this, finally had a future planned out for him. And the trafficking survivor had a child and said, I don't want to do this anymore. So the impact of family in both of that is family is what pushed people into this lifestyle, and family is what brought people back. So even for us, when we deal with kids, it's beyond the kids. We have to deal with the family structure. We are not there 24 hours a day. You as neighbors, as relatives, as whoever you are, you're not there 24 hours a day. But that mom and dad and that kid that you know, they're there. And they might need help and they might not even realize it. So the idea is we have to stop pointing fingers at some point and say, what can we do to help? Right? How can we serve you? Where do you need help? Not you're responsible for this, it's your fault for this. I'm 100% convinced that out of all the gang members we've dealt with, when we have to call their parents and we have to go to court and they're the accused person in a very serious offense, none of the parents want this for their kids. I've yet to come across one parent that says, this is the life I wanted from my kid. Thank you for hanging in there. If you have any questions, you have anything you want to talk about, by all means, let's talk.